Okay, we're out here working on this 944 plus V8 project again. We're kind of rambling on with the engine bay prep. It's a little, it's a little easy to get distracted by some things that don't need to get done first, like we're working on the power steering pump over there last, and really we can put the engine in without the power steering pump. That's not a big deal. That's on kind of on the side of the engine on near the top, so it's fairly easy to put in there. But one of the things we needed to complete was getting the heater hoses attached to the heater core and figuring out the positive and negative battery cable routing. So that's done. Those two things are the supply and return fuel line. Got a pretty good idea what we're going to do there. We don't really need to do that before the engine's in the car though. And over in here, one thing I keep forgetting to do is put the coil mount on the wheel well over there. The coil for, I guess that's number 7 cylinder, which is right by the brake master cylinder. The coil doesn't, there's not enough room between the valve cover and the master cylinder to put a coil. So they give you this little bracket that mounts to the wheel well over there behind the strut tower. So you have something to bolt the coil to. So there's that has to be done, and the main thing that has to happen is we have to get the brakes all back together so they can, so we can fill the reservoir up, because this reservoir, although it's the brake fluid reservoir, is also the reservoir for the clutch master cylinder. So one of the things you have to do before you put the engine in there, well, what we're going to do anyway, is attach the bell housing to the torque tube. Then we're going to put the release bearing, the clutch release bearing on there, and have all the hydraulic lines run to it, and have fluid to it, so you can't really bleed it until it's all together, because otherwise you'll pop the release bearing apart with the hydraulic pressure. But you want to have at least the juice all hooked up and going there, so you're sure it's all good to go. And in other news, we got the bolts in this week for the correct bolts from Renegade Hybrids. These are the right threads to go in here. They just sent me a whole new bolt kit, so that's good. Wait, yeah, this is the new bolt kit. So these are the old ones we tried to use last week. These are the new ones. So they knew exactly what I was talking about when I called. I talked to Zeus. Zeus is their 944 guy over at Renegade Hybrids, and I said, Zeus, I tried to bolt this thing in, and the bolts that hold the cross member to the frame just would not go in. And I checked the original bolts, and they're a different thread. And he said, oh, yeah. He says a very small percentage of cars actually have this finer thread. I don't know why, but some of them do. I guess 90% of them have the coarse thread for some reason. But I don't know, maybe it's because this is a later one. This car is one of the last ones built. There was 50 more 944 coupes after this one. This is a 91. So maybe that's why, I don't know. And part of the last bit of getting the brakes together is we have these stainless brake lines. I still have to do the passenger side front. The rears are done. That got done when we did the rear suspension. So they're on there. The calipers are hooked up hydraulic wise. Last night I got the one stainless brake line on the driver's side here. I got to go over and do the passenger side one. The big problem we've been having with the brakes is unfortunately my kit for doing flares on brake lines isn't working so good. So I had this cut right so it fits right into here, but it did not flare right, and I only had enough length for one try. So that means we're going to have to adapt it. So I bought some brake line, and we're going to make something and go to here. This one came out okay, but the bend is wrong. So this was just kind of a practice one. So I'll just redo it. And the big thing is we'll have to see if we can get this one cut to the right length and flared. And then we'll put a barrel between these two, which we already have that stuff. I just have to actually do it. And let's look at the list. So we've got about 8 things that got to happen. Brake system we talked about. The flywheel. I still have to get the dowels put in. I have the dowels in the freezer right now. They're a press fit, so I'm thinking if I put the dowels in the freezer, they'll contract, and maybe I'll heat up the flywheel a little bit, and hopefully they'll go right in easy. I tried last week to push them in and hammer them in and stuff, and they weren't going. So then we got to install the flywheel and clutch. That shouldn't be a big deal. And assemble the bell housing and torque tube and release bearing like we talked about. Install heater hoses. That's done. So we can actually check that off the list. Install heater hoses, check. Coil bracket. I want to wire up the engine, you know, basically the MSD stuff that goes around the engine, since some of those sensors are really difficult to get to, especially the crank sensor. So I want to get that done first before we get the engine bolted in there. And another thing I keep forgetting to do is the oil filter lines. This is taking a remote oil filter. Once the engine's in the car, it's probably going to be pretty difficult to get there to attach the stuff. So I want to at least have the lines crimped to the connections that go on there, and have the lines run out here, and then, you know, they can run wherever after that. And this is the coil. This coil has to come off so that we can remote mount it. And one thing I didn't notice before, I actually ordered one new coil, but this one here, one on number 2, this is actually burned away, so this coil's bad. Another thing I did was, since I was bending brake lines, I took my tubing bender and I rebent the dipstick so it's down. It should be well under the hood now. All right. Guess I better get to work.